That driveway is coming out by Friday, and you'll be billed for the asphalt removal, whether you like it or not." That was Diane Hollis, president of the Cedar Ridge Estates Homeowners Association for 9 years running, standing at the end of my gravel and shaling like she owned the dirt under my truck. She had a clipboard against her hip and a letter in her other hand, the third one that month, and behind her, a sheriff's deputy sat in his cruiser at the mouth of the road, with his window down, called out by Diane herself because she had decided my driveway was a violation of a covenant that did not cover my land. My name is Walt Brennan. I am 62 years old, a retired county road surveyor, and the access road she wanted torn out crosses ground my father deeded into a recorded easement the year before Cedar Ridge ever broke earth. What Diane did not know, what she never once thought to check in 9 years of letters, was that the driveway she called a violation was not mine to remove and not hers to bill. It sat inside a 50-foot ingress and egress easement filed at the county recorder's office in 1971, drawn and signed by my father. And that easement carried a clause she would have read in about 90 seconds if she had ever pulled the document she claimed to be enforcing. I had a copy of it in a manila folder on my kitchen table. I had the original plat. I had the surveyor's field notes, because the surveyor had been me 40 years before I retired. So let me ask you something, and I want you to sit with it the way I sat with it that morning. If a woman in a blazer and clean white sneakers stood at the foot of the road your father built and told you she was going to send a machine to tear it out by Friday and charge you for the privilege, and a deputy was parked 40 feet away to make it look official, what would you have done? Would you have shouted? Would you have called a lawyer that hour? Or would you have done what I did, which was nod once, take the letter, and go inside to my folder? I bought my place, or rather I never bought it because it was always ours, in the foothills east of a town I will just call Marsh Creek. High desert country where the pine gives way to juniper and the wind comes down the ridge in the afternoon, like it has somewhere to be. My father homesteaded the lower 40 acres in the late 1960s, and when the developers came through in 70 and 71 to plat what would become Cedar Ridge Estates above us, he did the smart thing. He sat down with their surveyor, a man named Albert Voss, and he negotiated a recorded access easement so that our parcel below would always have a legal road in and out across what would later be the edge of their development. He had the foresight, because he had spent his whole life watching other men lose their land to fine print. He taught me to read a plat before I could properly read a paperback. I followed him into surveying, spent 31 years with the county, and walked more boundary lines than I could count. My wife, Karen, and I raised our daughter on that land. Karen passed 4 years ago, in the spring, of a thing that took her fast and left the house too quiet. She had been a school teacher in Marsh Creek for 26 years, and the morning she came home with the diagnosis, she did not cry. She walked the lower fence line and decided where the lilacs would go, because she said if she was going to be looking at something out that kitchen window, she wanted it to be hers. We planted them together that last good spring, 6 bushes along the bottom rail where the road comes in, and I watered them by hand through that first summer. She was gone because I could not stand to let them die on top of everything else. Our daughter is grown and gone to Boise, married. 2 little ones I do not see enough. My granddaughter Nell came to live with me 2 years back, 16 and 18 now, after things got hard at her mother's. In a way that is not mine to tell, Nell is the reason I tell this story plain, instead of bitter. She showed up that first night with 2 duffel bags and a laptop and a wariness that took months to wear off. And somewhere in there, she figured out that an old man's house is a safe place to be, and I figured out that I was not as alone as I had let myself become. She watched the whole thing from the front row. she kept the camera running when I told her to, and more than once when I did not think to, because she had a steadier read on what was coming than I did. I keep records. I've kept records my entire adult life, because a surveyor who does not keep records is just a man with an opinion and a tape measure. When the first letter from Cedar Ridge came, I did what I have always done. I opened a manila folder, I wrote the date on the tab, and I slid the letter inside. I did not call anybody. I did not stew. I filed it. That folder would grow thick over the next 2 years, and Diane Hollis, who treated paper as a weapon she alone was allowed to hold, never once imagined that the man she was papering had been filing longer and cleaner than she had been alive to enforce anything. The first letter arrived on a Tuesday in March, 2 springs ago. It was printed on Cedar Ridge letterhead, cream stock, an embossed pine tree in the corner, and it informed me that my unpermitted private roadway was in violation of community aesthetic standards, and that I was to cease use and begin remediation within 30 days. I read it twice at the mailbox, then again at the kitchen table. Then I drove up to the Cedar Ridge Clubhouse, a low building with too much river rock on the front and a fountain out front that nobody had ever needed in high desert, and I asked the woman at the desk if I could speak with the board president. Diane came out in a coral blazer, with her sunglasses pushed up on her head, a leather portfolio under one arm, and she looked at me. The way you look at a delivery you did not order. Her shoes were white canvas, spotless, the shoes of a woman who never walked on anything that was not paved for her. She told me the matter was simple. Your road sits in our viewshed, she said. It's functionally part of our community, whether the paperwork's caught up or not, and the board has voted that it comes out. I told her, level as I could, that the road sat in a recorded easement that predated our community by several years, and that she was welcome to pull it at the county recorder's office. She tipped her head and gave me a small, patient smile, the smile you give a child who has gotten the rules wrong. She told me she did not need to pull anything, that she knew her own subdivision, that she had served 9 years and walked every foot of it, and that I would be hearing from their attorney. I thanked her and left. That was the first time she said the word functionally to me, and it would not be the last. On the drive home, I noticed my hands were tight on the wheel and made myself loosen them. I went inside and filed the letter. Here's the thing I want you to understand about a woman like Diane, and I learned it slow. She was not stupid, she was incurious, which is worse, because incuriosity wears the costume of confidence. She had run that board for 9 years. She had bullied setbacks and paint colors and basketball hoops into submission for so long that she had stopped believing there was any document in the county. She could not override with a vote and a stern letter, and there was a reason she wanted my road gone that went deeper than a viewshed. Though I did not know it yet, I would learn it. It was filed too, just not by me. The second letter came in April. This one threatened a fine of $100 a day for continued use of the non-conforming access until remediation. $100 a day. I sat at the kitchen table and did the arithmetic out loud while Nell ate her cereal, because I wanted her to hear how a number like that is meant to frighten you. $36,500 a year to use a road my father had paid a surveyor to draw before either of us was on the deed. I filed it. 2. Then I drove to the county recorder's office, a thing I should mention I could have done in my sleep, and I pulled a certified copy of the 1971 easement with the recorder's stamp on it, and I had 3 more certified copies made, and I put one in my folder, one in my truck, one in the gun safe with Karen's rings. A surveyor learns that a document you cannot produce is a document you do not have. I want to tell you about the easement clause, because it is the whole spine of this. My father, who had watched a neighbor lose a well to exactly this kind of slow administrative theft, had insisted the easement language say more than the usual ingress and egress. He sat at our kitchen table with Voss, the developer's surveyor, a younger man then, and he made him write it 3 times till it said what my father wanted. Voss had drafted it to read that the easement was perpetual, appurtenant to the lower parcel, and not subject to assessment, alteration, or removal by any future association, district, or successor in interest. Not subject to alteration or removal by any future association. My father made a developer's own surveyor write the words that would, half a century later, stop a woman in a coral blazer cold. He did it because he asked the question. Diane never asked, what happens to my road if these people up the hill ever decide they own everything they can see? I was a boy at that table. I did not understand it then. I understood it the morning the dozer came off the lowboy, and I have understood it every day since, which is why I am telling you to go read your own. The 3rd letter came in May, and it was the one I quoted at the top, the one that named Friday. By then, I had started to notice the other things. A man I did not know had been up at the property line twice with what looked like survey flags, except they were in the wrong places, set by someone who did not know the corners. A grader had been parked at the Cedar Ridge maintenance lot that had not been there before. And when I drove to town, I started seeing the same name on signs that I was seeing on the bottom of those letters. Hollis. Hollis Land and Development. Diane's husband, Roger Hollis, ran a development company, and Cedar Ridge Estates had a Phase 2 on the books, 40 more lots planned for the bench of land directly above my parcel. And the only graded route a construction fleet could take to reach that bench ran straight down the easement my father had recorded. My road, they did not want my driveway gone because it was ugly. They wanted it gone because it was the cheapest haul road into a $4 million second phase, and an easement that said not subject to alteration by any future association was the one thing standing between Roger Hollis. I did not have all of that. The morning Diane named Friday, I had a piece of it, a feeling, the way you feel a low spot in a road through the soles of your boots before you see it. What I had for certain was the letter, the deputy, at the mouth of the road, and Diane telling me the asphalt was coming out. The deputy's name was Ortiz. He was young, polite, visibly uncomfortable, and he did what a good officer does, which is exactly his job, and not 1 inch past it. He walked up the gravel after Diane had said her piece, and he told me he had been dispatched because a complaint had been filed about an illegal structure and a refusal to comply with a removal order, and that he was obligated to document it. I told him I understood. I told him I had been a county employee for 31 years, and I knew he had to roll on a complaint, regardless of merit. He looked relieved that I knew. Then I asked him if he would like to see the recorded easement, and he said he would. And I went inside and brought out the certified copy with the recorder's stamp, and I let him read it, standing in my kitchen with his hat in his hand. He read the clause. I watched him read it twice, the same way I had. Then he said, "Careful. Mr. Brennan, I'm not a judge, but this looks like a civil matter, and a recorded easement is a real thing. I can't tell anybody to bulldoze a recorded easement on my say-so. And frankly, I'm not going to stand by while somebody does." He told me to document everything. He told me that if equipment showed up to remove the road, I should call dispatch immediately and not interfere. and that the moment a machine touched ground inside a recorded easement, the nature of the complaint changed, and it became potential destruction of property. He told me to get a copy of this easement to the county council's office and to the sheriff's civil division, so it was on file before anything happened. Build the pattern, he said, get it documented. Then he gave me his card. That was the first ally signal, though I would not have called it that. It was a constrained man telling me, within the lines of his job, what the lines were. I filed his card. I filed the date. I wrote down every word he said while it was fresh, because memory is a liar and a legal pad is not. The fines began accruing in June, on paper, in the Cedar Ridge ledger. Diane read aloud at the monthly board meeting like scripture. I know, because I started going to the meetings. The clubhouse great room had a folding table up front for the board and rows of stacking chairs for the members. And the first night I came in late and took a chair in the back, a few heads turned and then turned away. I sat in that folding chair with Nell beside me, running her phone camera low against her knee, angled up just enough to catch the front table, and I listened to Diane Hollis describe me to a room of my uphill neighbors as a holdout. A man living on a grandfathered scrap, who refused to join the community, and whose private road was dragging down everyone's property values. She had a slide up on a pull-down screen, a photograph of my road taken from the bench above, and a red line drawn across it where the remediation would go. She said the word functionally again that night, into a microphone she did not need in a room that size. That lower parcel is functionally part of Cedar Ridge, she told the room, and Walt Brennan is functionally a freeloader living off the rest of us. A few people laughed, the nervous laugh of people who do not want to be the next slide. Most looked at their shoes. One man, 2 rows up, gray-haired in a feed store cap, turned around and looked at me for a long moment with something I could not read, and then turned back. I did not say anything. I was not there to make a speech. I was there to record that she said it, on what date, in front of how many people, and I did. Afterward in the parking lot, Nell was furious in the way the young get furious, fast. She can't just say that about you in front of everybody. I told her she could say whatever she liked, that words in a room were free, but that words on a record were evidence, and that Diane had just handed me another page for the binder for nothing. The tally grew. 3 letters. 61 days of fines on their ledger. 2 meetings on the record. I want to be honest about the cost of staying calm, because the channels that tell these stories sometimes make it look easy, and it is not. There were nights I sat at the table with the folder open, and my hands flat on it, and felt my heart going like a hammer, because a man my age does not relish a fight, he did not start, and because the land was not just land. Karen had planted the lilacs along the lower fence the spring before she got sick. The road went past them. Every time Diane said the word remediation, I heard a machine coming for the lilacs, and I had to put both hands flat on the table and breathe, and remind myself that the folder was the answer, not my temper. Nell would come sit across from me on those nights. "You okay, Grandpa?" she would ask, and I would say, "I'm filing," and she understood that filing was the thing that kept me steady. In July, the escalation widened. The way these things do, off my property and onto the people around me. I run a small side business out of the shop behind the house, sharpening and repairing surveying equipment, and old transits for hobbyists and a few working crews. Nothing big. A retirement thing Karen used to call my excuse to keep my hands moving. The shop still has my father's bench in it, and his old transit under a cloth, and clients drive up the easement to drop off and pick up. In July, 2 of them got letters. Cedar Ridge, letters on the cream stock, informing them that they were trespassing on community-adjacent roadways and that their vehicles had been documented and reported. One of them, a rancher named Sam Pruitt, who had been bringing me his grandfather's transit to fix, called me up, and at first he was laughing in disbelief. "Walt, I got a letter from some HOA about driving on your road." He could barely get it out. "I've been driving on your road for 30 years. Your dad waved at me from that road." I asked Sam if he would keep the letter. He said he would frame it, hang it in the barn. I asked him if he would instead give me a copy and write down the date he got it and how it came, and the laughing stopped. "Wait," he said. "This is bad, isn't it? This is the road thing, the thing with the board lady." I told him it was getting there. He was quiet a second, and then he said something I have not forgotten. "In the flat way, ranchers say the true things. My granddad lost the back 80 to a drainage district doing exactly this. Letters first. You let me know what you need, and you write down everything. You hear me? Everything." He gave me the copy. He wrote the date on it himself in pencil and signed it. The folder was getting thick enough now that I had moved it to a 3-ring binder with tab dividers by month. Around the same time, the man with the wrong survey flags came back, and this time he had a vest and a hard hat and a clipboard, and he told Nell, who was outside, that he was a county inspector doing a right-of-way assessment. Nell, God love her, had been raised right. She did not argue. She smiled and said, "Let me get my grandpa. He used to work for the county." And she came and got me, with the camera already running in her hand down at her side. I walked out and asked the man for his county identification. He did not have any. I asked him which department. He said the planning department. I told him I had retired out of the county surveyor's office, and I happened to know the planning department did not do right-of-way assessments on private easements, and that I would be calling the county to confirm his employment within the hour. He left fast. He was no inspector. He was somebody Roger Hollis sent to rattle me and put eyes on the grade of the road. And the vest had been ordered off the internet. I filed the date. I filed Nell's video. That was the 4th thing, and it was the first one that crossed a line, because impersonating a county official is not a stern letter. It is a crime. I called the county the next morning, as promised, and confirmed no such inspector existed. While I had the planning office on the phone, I asked a question I had been circling for weeks. I asked whether Cedar Ridge Estates had filed any preliminary plans for a Phase 2 expansion. There was a pause and some keyboard noise, and the woman said yes, there was a pre-application on file for 42 lots on the upper bench, submitted by Hollis Land and Development, and that it had been flagged incomplete pending resolution of site access. Site access. I thanked her, hung up, and sat very still. There it was, on the county's own record, in the county's own words. The whole campaign against my father's road was not about my road at all. It was about the 42 lots that could not be built until somebody made my easement disappear. I drove back to the recorder's office that afternoon, and I pulled everything. The Cedar Ridge plat, the Phase 2 pre-application, the grading plan that had been submitted with it. The clerk knew me from 31 years of pulling records across that same counter, and did not even ask why. She just brought the rolls and let me spread them out. And when I unrolled the grading plan on the hood of my truck in the recorder's parking lot, with the afternoon wind trying to take the corners and a rock on each end to hold it flat, I felt the cold settle into me, because the proposed construction hall route was drawn in red, a heavy, confident red line right down the center line of my father's easement. As if it were already theirs, they had drawn their trucks on my road before they had ever asked me. There was even a note in the margin in an engineer's tidy hand that read existing access to be improved and dedicated. Improved and dedicated. Like my father's road was a rough draft of theirs. They had assumed the letters and the fines and the fake inspector would clear the way. Because in 9 years, nobody had ever made Diane Hollis pull a document, and nobody had ever made Roger Hollis explain a red line. I made copies of all of it. I filed it. And then I did the thing that mattered most, the thing Ortiz had told me to do. I took a certified copy of the 1971 easement with its clause about not being subject to alteration or removal by any future association, and I walked it into the county council's office in the sheriff's civil division, and I had it stamped, received, and dated by both, and I got a receipt for each. I wanted the county to be holding my father's document in its own hands before a single machine ever rolled, so that when it did roll, nobody could pretend the easement was a surprise to anyone. It was September by then. The binder had a tab for every month. I was ready, and I was calm, and Nell had started keeping a second copy of every video on a drive she carried in her backpack. Because, as she put it, 2 is 1 and 1 is none. You taught me that. The fifth thing was the lawsuit. In October, Cedar Ridge filed a civil suit against me to compel removal of the road and to collect the accrued fines, by then totaling on their ledger over $40,000. I want to be clear that the lawsuit did not scare me the way it was meant to. A lawsuit is paper. Paper was my home field. I answered it myself with the certified easement attached as an exhibit, and I requested the court take notice that the instrument they sought to enforce removal against was a recorded perpetual easement explicitly protected from association alteration. I did not have a lawyer yet. I had something better for the moment, which was a document older and cleaner than anything they could put in front of a judge. I knew, though, that the lawsuit was not the real danger. The real danger was that a woman who had committed this fully, who had a husband with $4 million riding on my road disappearing, was running out of legal moves and getting closer to the day she would stop waiting for paper. That day was a Thursday in November. I remember it was Thursday because Nell had a half day and was home, which is the only mercy in the whole memory, because she had the camera. I was in the shop when I heard it, the diesel cough and rumble of something heavy coming up the easement, and I came out wiping my hands and saw a bulldozer, a real one, a track machine on a lowboy, being offloaded at the top of my road, and Diane Hollis standing beside it in a magenta blazer, and Roger Hollis next to her for the first time, in a quarter zip and boots that had never seen work, and a man in the dozer's seat waiting for a signal. I did not run. I want to tell you, I was calm, but the truth is, my heart was going like that hammer again, and what kept my feet steady was 40 years of knowing exactly what the ground under that machine legally was. I told Nell, quiet, call dispatch. Tell them, equipment is on the easement to destroy it. Give them the case number on Ortiz's card. Then keep filming and do not stop. She was already dialing. I walked up the road, not fast, and I stopped a good distance from the dozer, and I held up one hand, not at the people, at the machine. The way you stop a grader on a job site, Diane, I said. Before that machine moves another foot, I need you to understand what it's about to drive into. She told me she understood perfectly that the board had voted that the fines were unpaid and that she was exercising the association's right to abate a nuisance. She said, and this was the third time and the worst, "This road is functionally ours, Walt. It always has been. And we're done waiting on your paperwork." Roger said nothing. Roger was watching the road, not me, and I understood then that Roger knew exactly what the easement said, had probably known for months and had decided that a destroyed road and a $40,000 fine would be cheaper and faster than a clean legal fight he would lose. He was betting that possession and a running machine would change the facts on the ground before the law could catch up. He had bet wrong. And here is the still center of the whole story. The part I have played back in my mind more than any other. I did not shout. I did not throw myself in front of the machine. I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket where I had been carrying it since the third letter, and I took out the certified copy of the 1971 easement, folded once with the county recorder's stamp visible on the face. And I unfolded it, and I held it up so Diane could see the stamp, and I said, "This is a recorded perpetual easement. Drawn in 1971, signed by your own development's original surveyor, and it says in plain language that it is not subject to alteration or removal by any future association. The county council has a stamped copy. The sheriff's civil division has a stamped copy. The moment that blade touches this ground, it is not abatement. It is destruction of a recorded property right. And your husband's name is on the grading plan that needs it gone." For a moment, nobody moved. The dozer idled. The wind came down the ridge, the way it does in the afternoon. And then 2 sheriff's vehicles came up the road, Ortiz in the lead, because Nell had called and given them the case number, and they had been, it turned out, half expecting this. Ortiz got out, and I handed him the easement before he asked, and he read the clause standing in the road, and then he turned to the man in the dozer's seat and told him to shut the machine down and step off, and he turned to Diane and Roger and told them that he had a recorded easement on file at the county HOA, that any removal of that road would be a criminal matter, and that they needed to load the equipment back onto the lowboy and leave. Diane started to say the word functionally one more time, and Ortiz, polite as ever, said, "Ma'am, the recorder's office isn't functional. It's recorded. There's a difference, and it's the whole difference." The dozer shut down. The silence after a big diesel quits is a physical thing. It settled over the road, over Karen's lilacs at the lower fence, over Nell standing on the porch with her phone still up. And nobody said anything at all for a long moment. That was the reveal. And it was quiet. And it was paper. Exactly the way my father would have wanted it. The consequence, though, took longer, and it was bigger than I expected, because once a thing like that starts to come apart, it comes apart along every seam at once. The criminal referral on the fake inspector went first. When the sheriff's investigators pulled the thread of the man in the internet vest, it led back to a subcontractor of Hollis Land and Development, and the question of who had directed a man to impersonate a county official landed squarely in Roger's lap. And then I got the call I did not expect. The one that broke the thing wide. A woman named Paula Reyes, who had sat on the Cedar Ridge board for 3 of Diane's 9 years, called me one evening, and her voice was the careful voice of someone who has decided something hard. She had been at the vote, she said. There had never really been a vote, not a clean one. Diane had told the board the easement was lapsed and the county was on their side, and Paula had believed her the way you believe the person who has been right about the paint colors for 9 years. Paula had seen the grading plan too, though, at a meeting at the Hollis house, the red line down my road, and she had started to understand that she had been voting for Rogers Hall Road and calling it community standards. I should have pulled the document myself, she told me. I'm a grown woman. I let her tell me what it said. She offered to give a statement, and she did, and it was Paula's statement, more than anything I held, that turned the whole board against Diane, because it came from inside the room. The destruction attempt on the easement, witnessed by a deputy and filmed from 2 angles by an 18-year-old with a backup drive in her backpack, became its own matter. And the Phase 2 pre-application, the 42 lots on the upper bench, died on the county's desk because the only viable haul route had just been confirmed in writing as a protected perpetual easement that the developer had attempted to destroy. The county does not look kindly on a developer who tries to bulldoze the very access dispute that is holding up his permit. Phase 2 was denied. The $4 million Roger had been chasing through my front yard evaporated, not because I sued him, but because he had reached for my road one time too many, in front of the wrong document and the wrong deputy. The local paper ran it on the front of the second section, a photograph of the lowboy and the dozer on my road, and the headline did the rest of the work in town. The civil suit Cedar Ridge had filed against me was dismissed, and the court found the easement valid, perpetual, and exactly what it said it was. The $40,000 in fines was voided in full, every dollar, because you cannot fine a man for using a road the county recorder says is his to use. Here are the two numbers I want you to hold side by side, because they are the whole arithmetic of it. Fines Cedar Ridge collected from me across 2 years of letters, lawsuits, and a bulldozer. 0. Date my father's easement was recorded and made bulletproof against exactly this 1971, 51 years before Diane Hollis sent a machine to test it. 51 years of a stamp page beat 9 years of a stern voice in about the time it takes a diesel engine to wind down. Diane resigned the Cedar Ridge presidency before the next meeting, though resigned is a generous word for what the board asked her to do once the lawsuit and the criminal referral made the papers. The HOA, terrified of liability for the destruction attempt their president had ordered, settled my counterclaim for the cost of my certified copies, my filing fees, and the appraised diminution nobody could really calculate, and they recorded, at long last, a formal acknowledgement of my easement in their own subdivision documents. The thing Diane spent 9 years insisting was functionally hers is now, in writing, in their own files, permanently and explicitly mine. Roger Hollis pleaded down on the impersonation matter and paid a fine that I am told was considerably more than $40,000. The bench above me is still sagebrush and rabbit brush and the afternoon wind, and it will stay that way because the road to it runs through my father's signature. I did not gloat. I want you to know that. Because the temptation was there, and I am not a saint. The afternoon the suit was dismissed, I came home, and I did not call anyone to crow. I walked down to the lower fence where Karen's lilacs were going to bud out in a few months, and I stood there a while, and Nell came down and stood with me. She had her phone in her pocket for once, not in her hand. "Grandpa," she said, "you never even raised your voice." I told her that my father taught me a man who has the document does not need the volume. She thought about that. Then she said, 2 is 1 and 1 is none, and grinned, and I put my arm around her shoulders, and we walked back up the road my father built, past the lilacs and the gate and the shop where his transit still sits on the bench, and the house was not as quiet as it had been. So here is the lesson plain, the way I promised it. If you own land, pull your deed and read it, the whole thing, every clause, before anybody ever gives you a reason to. Walk your boundaries with the recorded plat in your hand and find your corners. If there is an easement, a water right, a covenant, anything recorded that touches your ground, go to the county recorder's office and get a certified copy with the stamp on it, and make 3 more and put them where a fire or a flood or a bulldozer cannot reach all of them at once. When the letters start, and for some of you they will, do not answer them with your temper. Answer them with a folder. Write the date on the tab. File every letter Every fine, every meeting, every fake inspector, every name you see twice. Document the pattern, because a single incident is your word against theirs, and a documented pattern is a case. Get your records request in early and find out what they actually want. Because the viewshed is never the viewshed. The aesthetics are never the aesthetics. Somebody usually wants something your land is sitting on top of. And when they finally send the machine, you will not need to shout, because you will have the one thing they never bothered to check. The older, cleaner document wins. It is slow, and it is quiet, and it wins. If you have got a story like this, a fence line, a gate, a road, a well, somebody tried to take with a clipboard and a vote, put it in the comments, because I read them. And so do a lot of people who are, right now, sitting at their own kitchen table with their own first letter. If this kind of story is what you come here for, the calm kind, the documented kind, go ahead and subscribe so the next one finds you. And the next one is a good one. It is about a widow in cattle country whose HOA tried to condemn the stock pond her husband dug by hand, not knowing she held the only adjudicated water right in the whole valley, recorded the year of the drought, and what happened the summer they tried to drain it. I will see you on that road. Take care of your corners.